our country director. Hello. Let's welcome the country director of Amnesty International Ghana, Genevieve Partington, to give us the welcome address and then the key findings of the annual report. Hello. Hello. Please give us a moment. They are fixing. Hello. Hello. Please, we are experiencing some technical issues. Please give us. Hello. Hello. So whilst we are waiting, you have an envelope with the press kit, the press information about the report. Once it's launched, all the details that you need in the report is actually available in the press kit. After here, we'll do the interviews with the country director and then the interviews with the board vice chair, Madam Charity. So it's going to be a very short session. So once after the interviews, and then we close from here. Hello. It's connected from us. Hello. Hello. Hello.
1 2 1 2. Testing mic 1. 1 2. One, two. No, it's not reflecting. 1 2.
Hello.
1 2 1 2. One, two. Test the mic 1.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and good morning to those watching from the live stream. Great. Technical difficulties. That's what happens with technology. Anyway, this morning we're here to officially launch the Amnesty International reports. We're launching 2. And we're doing it in press conference style. So today is for the journalists. We'll have a Q&A session to follow after. So distinguished members of the press, comrades in the struggle for justice, and citizens, live streamers bearing witness across Ghana and beyond, good morning again. And my deepest gratitude for your presence at this critical press conference, where we will unveil not merely a report, but a cartography of resistance against the global architecture of oppression. Today, we launch in Ghana Amnesty International's State of the World's Human Rights Report for 2024 that was published just in April this year, and also a very pressing report on death sentences and executions covering the period of 2024 globally, within a historical context fundamentally altered from previous iterations. We are at the intersection of 2 opposing forces: the deliberate defunding of the very institutions built to protect fundamental rights, and the concurrent rise of anti-rights movements that intentionally undermine the social compact of human dignity. This dialectic between organized oppression and diminished resistance creates what materialist analysis might term a perfect storm of vulnerability for marginalized populations and defenders of freedom, justice, and the rule of law. As we present our findings to you, the Fourth Estate, the amplifiers of truth and information, we ask you to strongly consider not simply isolated violations, but the structural patterns that reveal the urgent solidarities they demand. Our report addresses human rights through a tripartite analysis. We'll look at the global, regional, and national, providing a comprehensive examination across 155 countries, including our homeland, Ghana. On the global stage, we have witnessed the normalization of dehumanizing rhetoric and the calculated erosion of international human rights frameworks. The report documents with unflinching clarity how Russia's ongoing imperial aggression in Ukraine, the devastating genocidal violence against the people of Gaza by the Israeli government, and the catastrophic humanitarian crisis in Sudan. They all represent not aberrations, but the logical conclusion of a world order where power supersedes principle. Across continents, civilians bear the disproportionate burden of these violations. Indiscriminate attacks on population centers, deliberate targeting of hospitals and schools, and the weaponization of humanitarian aid represent flagrant violations of the most basic tenets of human dignity. The report reveals how unlawful attacks and killings by government forces and armed groups were reported across the region, including our brothers from Burkina Faso, Cameroon, and the Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ethiopia, Mali, to name but a few. Military operations frequently left trails of civilian death, with devastating examples including the military killings of 223 civilians, including at least 56 children in Burkina Faso. Systems of apartheid and structural discrimination continue to undermine equal rights, with Israel's treatment of Palestinians representing one of the most formalized systems of domination in our contemporary world. Meanwhile, climate displacement intensifies, digital surveillance expands, and the authoritarian governance gains disturbing legitimacy in spaces once considered democratic strongholds. What should concern every journalist here and across the world, and indeed every citizen covering issues, is not merely the violations themselves, but the hegemonic discourse that frames human rights as a liberal luxury rather than fundamental basis of human dignity. The dangerous position fundamentally misunderstands that rights are not benevolent grants from state power, but inherent to our collective humanity and hard-won through centuries of struggle for social justice. Now we come down to the regional challenges, looking at Africa, our continent. We face uniquely pressing contradictions exacerbated by neo-colonial conflict, structural economic instability, climate disruption, and entrenched corruption. The report documents how large proportions of the region's population continue to face hunger across Africa by the worst El Nino-induced drought in a century. The drought destroyed crops and livestock, threatening food security for millions, with 17% of the population of Southern Africa region, 68 million people needing aid. Conflict-related sexual violence has surged alarmingly, with more than 11,000 cases of gender-based violence reported in the Central African Republic in just the half of the year. Democratic Republic of Congo reported cases doubled in the first quarter of 2024 compared to the same period in 2023. For media professionals, reporting of these issues pay particular attention to the shrinking civic space across our continent. Those who dare to criticize government failures, corruption, or abuses face brutal crackdowns. In countries like Guinea, Kenya, Mozambique, Nigeria, and Senegal, police killings and mass arrests of protesters have been documented. The same in Ghana also last year. These attacks on civic freedoms represent not merely violations of individual rights, but systematic attempts to fracture our collective capacity to build just and accountable societies that abide by the rule of law. They highlight how the colonial structure of the state, designed originally for extraction and control rather than service and liberation, continues to function according to its original logic, despite the formal end of colonialism. Now we look at Ghana. Of course, we have to look at the positive and the negative. So while Ghana has improved its ranking in the 2024 World Press Freedom Index, elevated levels of intimidation and violence against journalists have continued. In January 2024, for example, a journalist was physically assaulted by a ruling party member at the time, Member of Parliament, and his supporters during parliamentary primaries. In May, the Ghana Journalists Association called on all politicians to condemn attacks on journalists after another journalist was physically assaulted. In July, a planned protest in Accra to demand government action on cost of living crisis was banned at police request, citing lack of personnel available to provide security. And then, of course, in September last year, we witnessed the 53 persons who were arrested during the protest Stop Galamsey, where some were released and about 31 faced charges including unlawful assembly. Women and girls' rights also continue to be threatened in multiple dimensions. We look at last year, April, where activists condemned the marriage of a 12-year-old girl to a priest. The girl was put under police protection, but no arrests were made. We also look at witchcraft. The Coalition Against Witchcraft Accusations launched an online petition to push President Akufo-Addo at the time to sign the bill into law. Hundreds of accused women in northern and northeast regions remain in witch camps. They fled to after being rejected from their communities. On a positive and uplifting note, we must commend the government and the Parliament of Ghana for the passing of the Affirmative Action Gender Equality Bill to increase women's participation in public life, which was passed in July last year and quickly signed into law by the President. This at least aims to push for gender equity. By 2020-30, we should have achieved a 50% goal. Currently, I must say, looking at our statistics that we've gathered, we are not doing well so far in terms of implementing that law. And we are calling on the President of Ghana to please push for more appointments of women. The current appointments that have come through are quite disappointing, I must say. Mostly men. Also, the Parliament passed a bill that ensures that there is no VAT on locally manufactured sanitary pads. They also removed the import duty on raw materials for locally manufactured sanitary pads. And now sanitary pads are no longer classified as a luxury good. So those are on the positive note. However, what do we see? The markets, the pads have not reduced in cost. Regarding LGBTQI people's rights, we have witnessed disturbing regression. In February last year, since the bill was introduced into Parliament, that is the Human Sexual Rights and Family Values Bill, when it was passed, we saw a rise in cases of abuse towards the LGBTQI community. The bill offends the very spirit of our Constitution and should not be signed into law. On economic and social rights, food prices continue to be high, threatening rights to food and health. Food inflation is at its peak, even as we speak, regardless of the cedi reducing to the dollar. Environmental rights are increasingly threatened as illegal mining and logging pose even more disastrous outcomes. The price of cocoa continues to soar because of failing harvests from land that cocoa producers claim has been destroyed by illegal small-scale mining, also known as galamsey. Distinguished guests, dear journalists, this is why I must directly address the significant reduction in funding for human rights work globally. This crisis threatens a lot in terms of achieving our goals as human rights activists. You will see that major donors have redirected their resources, leaving some of us in the development space struggling to maintain critical monitoring, documentation, and advocacy programs. Human rights challenges may seem overwhelming, but your engagement constitutes the material basis for change. To the journalists present, we urge you to go beyond merely reporting violations to investigating structural patterns, highlighting community resistance, and examining the systemic causes of rights abuses. As media professionals, we call on you to lead against the use of misinformation to abuse individuals, especially using the technology and the internet. Your role is not merely to document what is happening, but to help the public understand why it matters and what liberation requires for our collective good. To the government of Ghana, we of course acknowledge the progress, though limited, I must say, in implementing national laws and international instruments, but appeal for immediate action on the human rights concerns documented in our report. We particularly call on presidential action on the bill to criminalize witchcraft accusations, the permanent end, I repeat, the permanent end, although it's partially abolished, we want the permanent end to the death penalty in our legal system. We also want the government to ensure that sanitary pads are distributed for free for all school-going girls, and the reconsideration of legislation that undermines the rights of LGBTQI individuals. This report is not merely a collection of statistics and cases from 2024, but an avenue to deepen our practice in international solidarity as a core value of our human rights work. Amnesty International Ghana, we shall continue our efforts to promote human rights education, activism, research, and advocacy, regardless of these challenging times. We shall continue to light the candle in the darkness, ensuring that human dignity and rights remain non-negotiable, even in times as challenging as these. I thank you very much.
Good better. Thank you very much, Director. Genevieve Partington is the Country Director of Amnesty International Ghana. Please, let's do it again for her. Awesome. I mentioned to you that we are launching 2 reports this morning, and you've just heard the highlights in the Amnesty International report. The link is in the press kit that as I've mentioned already, and if you look around the room, you see the scan copies, the QR codes, so you can have access to the report in detail. At this point, let's welcome the Board Vice Chair of Amnesty International Ghana, Madam Charity Bature. She's going to tell us about the key findings in the death penalty report. Please, a round of applause to her.
Good morning, everyone. I guess I'm still visible after all these. Okay. Thank you. Distinguished members of the press, viewers joining us from across Ghana and beyond, I bring warm greetings and I thank those of us here for your presence. As we conclude on the launch of Amnesty International's flagship report, I plead to draw our attention specifically to the death sentences and executions reports covering 2024, which documents the global application of capital punishment during a year of troubling contradictions, where progress towards abolition continues alongside alarming increases in state-sanctioned killing in some countries. As you know, every year Amnesty International releases a report recording death sentences and executions across the world. This report covers the period of 2024 and gathers information from various sources, including official figures, courts, individuals sentenced to death and their families, media reports, and civil society organizations. we acknowledge that in countries like China, Vietnam, Belarus, and North Korea, death sentences and executions remain state secrets, obscuring the full global picture. Our research reveals a deeply troubling trajectory. A 32% increase in executions globally, with 1,518 documented cases across 15 countries, the highest figure since 2015. This sharp rise was driven primarily by 3 countries: Iran, with figures as high as 972 plus; Saudi Arabia, with 345 plus; Iraq has 63 plus, and Yemen with 38 plus and following. China remains the world's lead executioner, though exact figures remain classified as state secrets. The method of execution continues to include beheading, hanging, lethal injection, shooting, nitrogen gas expansion. A total of 144 women were executed in 5 countries: Egypt with 2, Iran with 30, Iraq with 1, Saudi Arabia had 9, and Yemen recorded 2, which could have been more with the unknown numbers in China. It is disturbing to note that 637 people, which accounts for 42% of all recorded executions, were put to death for drug-related offenses in China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Singapore. Additionally, 8 people in Iran and Somalia were executed for crimes committed when they were below 18 years of age. In flagrant violation of the international law. While executions increase, new death sentences decrease to 2,087 cases across 46 countries, which is down from 2,428 cases recorded in 2023. Globally, at least 28,085 people remain under sentence of death at the end of 2024. Africa continues to make progress towards abolition, despite concerning development in certain countries. Both recorded executions and death sentences decreased by approximately 10% across sub-Saharan Africa. For the second consecutive year, Somalia was the only country in the region to carry out executions, 34 in total. On December 21st, Zimbabwe took a historic step when President Emerson Mnangagwa signed legislation abolishing the death penalty for ordinary crimes. Zambia, which fully repealed the death penalty in 2023, made abolition irreversible by ratifying the second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights adopted its 5th resolution calling for a moratorium on executions, further solidifying the continent's leadership in its global human rights movement. However, we observed troubling steps in Burkina Faso, Democratic Republic of Congo, and Nigeria that could expand the use of the death penalty. South Sudan, and Uganda imposed death sentences after a period of hiatus. In stark contrast, the the Middle East and North Africa witnessed an alarming 30% increase in executions, rising from 1,073 in 2023 to 1,442 in 2024. 8 countries carried out executions. These are Egypt, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Yemen. Executions in Yemen more than doubled compared to 2023, while Iraq saw executions nearly quadruple. Iran, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia accounted for 96% of all recorded executions in the region. Now coming home to Ghana. In Ghana, Amnesty International recorded 6 new death sentences in 2024, all for high treason under Article 3 of Ghana's 1992 Constitution. By the end of the year, 182 people remained under sentence of death. This is an increase from 180 the previous year. Someone might say the increase is 2, but 1 person makes a great number. So it's indeed an increase. January 2024 marked a watershed moment with Act 1101 abolishing the death penalty from the criminal code after former President Nana Akufo-Addo assented to the Criminal Offences Amendment Bill of 2023. This historic advance has already shown concrete results. 12 people convicted of murder and conspiracy to commit murder receive life imprisonment rather than previous mandatory death penalty, which of course is also a positive side for us as a country. Despite this progress, the Armed Forces Bill, which would have abolished the death penalty from the military code, remained unsigned when the period for presidential assent expired. This creates a troubling inconsistency in our legal framework, where civilian crimes no longer warrant death, while military offenses and high treason still do. The 3 acquittals recorded in Ghana during 2024 highlights the inherent risks of irreversible error in any system imposing capital punishment. These are individuals who had their cases progress differently, which they might have faced execution for crimes they did not commit. Amnesty International Ghana started its campaign to abolish the death penalty in 1985, when no country in Africa had abolished the death penalty for all crimes. Today, 29 countries on our continent have done so. Our decade-long advocacy culminated in the historic parliamentary vote in July 2023 to remove the death penalty from the Criminal and the Other Offences Act and the Armed Forces Act. While we celebrate the partial abolition through the Act 1101, our work remains incomplete until the death penalty is removed from the Ghanaian law. Someone will ask, why is Amnesty against death penalty? Why are we interested in it? Yes, we are interested. This is because in 2024, the death sentence was not just meted out to persons who have committed murder. 8 people in Iran and Somalia were executed for crimes they committed when they were below 18 years. People with mental health challenges remain on death row in Japan, the Maldives, and then the USA. Confessions are sometimes extracted through torture or other forms of ill treatment, alongside many other violations of international law that make the death penalty a profoundly flawed instrument of justice. The death penalty fundamentally breaches human rights, particularly the right to life and the right to freedom from cruel, inhuman, or degrading punishment. Once carried out, an execution cannot be reversed, even when evidence later proves innocence. The 9 exonerations recorded globally in 2024, in Japan was 1, Malaysia had 5, and the USA 3, underscore these risks. Let's understand that mistakes can be made, and several people are wrongfully convicted. Execution is irreversible, and death sentences and executions can never serve as a deterrent to any crime. And we must continue this dialogue with compassion and a commitment to justice. As we move forward, Amnesty International Ghana calls for 1, a constitutional reform to eliminate the death penalty for all offenses, including high treason. 2, reintroduction and passage of the Armed Forces Bill. And 3, commutation of all 182 existing death sentences to terms of imprisonment. Distinguished members of the press, as resources for promoting human rights work diminish, your role in amplifying these issues becomes even more vital. The flame of human rights may flicker in today's headwinds, but a flame that endures grows stronger. It hardens into resolve. It spreads to light other flames, creating constellations of resistance that illuminate the path towards justice. It is a call to all of us to ensure that our rights are protected. Every human being on earth have earned life, and you have the right to it. On this note, thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's do it better. For the Board Vice Chair of Amnesty International Ghana, Madam Charity Bature. Thank you very much, Madam Charity. Thank you very much, Director Genevieve, as well. So just as I mentioned earlier, we are launching 2 major reports by Amnesty International. The Amnesty International report, which is the state of the world's human rights, and then the death sentences and executions report. I believe after listening to these 2 speeches, you've now understood or heard that in Ghana, or as at last year, 2024, we had 182 people still living on death row in Ghana. I believe the news will now read Amnesty International calls for the full abolition of the death penalty, especially the director mentioned that we want the complete removal of the death penalty from our constitution. I believe this news is really going to trend. Journalists, are you here? Are you going to make us trend? Yes, because when it comes to the death penalty, obviously we want the total abolishment. And we've also had, I believe you watched the constitutional reviews discussion and recommendations. Amnesty International also submitted our recommendations to the Constitutional Review Committee. So please push our stories for us. At this point, we are going to launch the 2 reports officially, but we have some very important guests in our midst. The country director and then the board chair of Amnesty International Senegal. The directors of Amnesty International Sierra Leone and Burkina, apologies. Please, can you please come up stage here, please? And join us, support us, launch the report.
So we have, I'll introduce them properly because they are visiting. We have Monsieur Yves Traoré, he's the Amnesty International Director for Burkina Faso. He's visiting us. You know, we have Amnesty offices across the world, and they are partners. We also have, please come this way. We also have Mr. Solomon Subandi. He's also Amnesty International Director for Sierra Leone. And together they are here with us to launch the report. So,
okay. Thank you. So, on this note, I wish to duly declare the Amnesty International report duly launched.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, monsieur. D'accord. Oui. Okay, so at this point, and monsieur, please, apologies for the introduction as well, please. My apologies. Great. So at this point, we'll be taking some Q&As from the press. We will be doing that right here. So journalists, brace yourselves for your questions. Director, would you like to move aside so that we can, or you want to be sitting? Okay, so please go ahead and then you can ask your questions. Yes. Anyone wants to? Yes, anyone has questions? Anyone wants to ask to speak? Or any clarification from the press? Yes, please.
Yes, you raised an issue about the sanitary pads. I think the president launched the free sanitary pad for messages students and even the basic schools. Isn't that enough, or what else should be done to add to what you're saying? Then again, on the issue of freedom, what are you suggesting that the country needs to do at the moment to ensure that freedom that Amnesty International demands?
Thank you. We'll take another question. Anyone from the media, please. Honorable cherished journalist, any other question? Okay, the director, please take this answer.
Okay, so I'll start. In terms of the free sanitary pads, we had, the Office of the Vice President, for example, they've taken key interest in this issue of period poverty. And I believe in the President's 120 days social contract, it was mentioned that they would launch this. You said it's launched, but from after launching something, we need implementation. And as we speak, I'm not aware that there has been any implementation. I'm sure they are working on it. So it's something that we still need to appeal that it is worked on fast so that we actually see that there's implementation going on. Sanitary pads, we need to look for even more sustainable solutions. So for example, Amnesty International Ghana, we are part of a technical committee that is working with Ghana Standards Authority. We are looking at getting alternative pads. So, ones that are not disposable, but you can reuse for a certain period. But we have to make sure they are made with the right and safe material. So this is something that is being worked on with Ghana Standards Authority. So I'm hoping that very soon they'll come out with something so that we have at least a standard to reach in terms of alternative pads. Because let's be honest, the disposables not necessarily sustainable. I'll give you my own personal experience, and as embarrassing as it is, I want to share it because even me that can afford pad. I was at a hotel, I won't mention the hotel's name. I went to the hotel, and unfortunately I had run out of pad. So I was looking for pad. It was 7 p.m. Sometimes hotels have little kiosks to sell things. That kiosk was closed. The hotel was in a secluded area, and I needed the pad now. So I quickly ran to the reception desk and I asked the receptionist, do you have any sanitary pad? There was nothing there. I went to the toilet of the reception, the washroom. There was nothing there. Meanwhile, in other countries, you have a container where there are sanitary pads, a vanity kit, where you can just access 1 or 2 pads should you be caught in that situation. So yeah, I did not have any means. I didn't know what to do. So I had to roll at that moment, and then I had to get an Uber to go to somewhere, a Shell station nearby, which was 10 minutes away, by the way, to go and get pad. So it is really not, it's the reality on the ground. It's not that accessible. So you can imagine me living in the city center. Look at what I had to go through, the stress of looking for a pad. I asked even people at the reception, like people at the hotel lobby, do you have any pad in your bag? No, sorry, don't have any. And I had to get an Uber for 10 minutes. So that's the reality we're facing. So we want implementation to be carried out. That's why we're appealing to governments. Second thing, freedom of expression. What else do we need to do? So Amnesty International Ghana, we've had a meeting with the Attorney General, Dr. Dominic Ayine, and he was very receptive of us. And we discussed some of the issues regarding protests, regarding protection. We've also met with the Director General of CID, very lovely and in fact, very progressive lady in terms of looking at ensuring that the citizens of Ghana are protected. So of course, you know how it is, new government, it's nice and rosy at the moment, and we pray it continues like that. So far, everybody is receptive to speaking to us, to engaging with us. Now we have to look at the reality on the ground and ensure that the things we are demanding or requesting for actually come into play. I'll give an example. The recent protests by a number of politicians, I believe, opposition or something, they were able to walk to Jubilee House and present their petition. Everything was conducted well. The police engaged with them very well. They were allowed to present their petition. But my view is that they were politicians. They are also opposition party. So we are praying that if typical civilians like you and I go out to protest, the same treatment is also given to us, and not what happened last year, September, where a number of our brothers and sisters were arrested, some not treated very well, refusal of legal representation and what's not, and they were even facing charges. We are happy the charges have been dropped. I must say that was done early on this year, so we commend the government for that. But we are hoping that there is not a repetition of this sort of maltreatment. So what else are we doing? The Public Order Act, it needs to be reviewed. We are in the process of doing that privately, and then once we do that, we need to present our findings and recommendations to the Attorney General's office and to the government of Ghana. So these are some of the things we are doing. We are also doing a lot on training social movements and persons who are more likely to go and protest in the streets on how to be safe during protests, but also what to do when you are arrested during a protest. So these are some of the issues we are working on. Yeah, so thank you. Any more questions, please?
Thank you very much, Director. Yes.
Mine is on the LGBTQ. Per your report or per your speech, you said the government should reconsideration of legislation that undermines the rights of LGBTQ individuals. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think it's very clear. The current bill in Parliament. To stand. Okay, I've been asked to stand. So, the current bill in Parliament clearly shows that it's discriminatory, but it's not discriminatory to just the LGBTQI community. It's also discriminatory to academics, to the media, to advocates like myself. The bill as it currently stands, if it should pass and if it should be signed into law, would be very detrimental to all of us, because currently as it stands, we are all implicated in the bill. Anyone can be arrested. Imagine if you have a brother or sister who identifies as being part of the LGBT community. It's actually your duty to report. If you are a teacher and there's a student who is part of the LGBT community, they are at risk. Since the bill was passed last year, there have been reported cases of violence, reported cases of extortion. Now, of course, the police, when you report a case to the police station, it is assault. Assault is general. We don't necessarily point it towards, oh, is it because you were LGBT, is it because you were a woman? But it's seen as assault, and that's how it's reported. But there are civil society organizations who are recording these cases and documenting them, and there has been a considerable increase in violence towards persons in this group, minority group. So that is why we are not for it. We believe it should be completely scrapped. Some parts of the bill also already address issues that are already in our constitution. So that is why that is quite clear in our report. Thank you. Any other questions, please? Did I say yes?
Thank you. In your report, you mentioned the number of inmates on death row as of 2024. Do you know the conditions they are in right now?
Do I know?
The conditions.
The conditions.
Yes.
Oh, as for the conditions, I know, because I've visited the Nsawam Medium Security Prison, and I've been to what they call the condemned block, where they keep those on death row. So I would say that they are secluded from engaging with any other, persons within the prison system. They do not have access to education, but they do have, I know they have a TV, they watch TV, they see the news, they have access, some level of access to books, but they are not allowed to move around the prison freely. They are only allowed to be kept within their block, and I feel like that is an infringement of their rights. I know that the argument is, okay, how about the families of those that, have lost the victims, the families of the victims of the crimes? There have been studies, statistics, facts that show that, the families of these victims actually do not believe in death row. They believe in life imprisonment. They believe there has to be a form of punishment, but not being put on death row. Now, I know the argument of the government is that there haven't been executions for some time now. Let's say we're moving to almost 30 years now. There haven't been 30 plus years, there have not been any executions, which is great. But look at what happened, for example, in Burkina. There was a coup d'etat, and now they have brought back the death row. I mean, let's not play with peace. Yes, Ghana is peaceful, but anything can just turn things around. So we feel at Amnesty International that, the death row needs to be scrapped completely. Also, we have to look at our system. Prison is not just a place for punishment, it's a place for reform. So if you are keeping these people on death row, you are not giving them any chance to reform. Now, we've done a study, which we haven't come out with yet, but we are working on it, where we did research in the prison system, specifically on those on death row. And most of the people on death row currently are first-time offenders. It's very contextual. It's not like in the States. In the States, when you go to some of the specific states like Texas or Alabama, most of the people on death row are not first-time offenders. But unfortunately for us, that is the system we're in. You also look at the level of education with those on death row. You will see that most of them did not complete junior high school. You find a few that went to senior high school. You find a handful that went to university but did not complete. But most of them did not complete even junior high school. What does this mean? That means that the system, most of the persons who are incarcerated are persons who have a sort of low level of living in terms of economic and social. So, we really have to consider our system. Also, there's a 1% chance that some of the people there have been wrongly accused. We need to acknowledge that. Currently, we don't have a classification of murder charges in Ghana. So it's very important. I've heard several times that Office of Chief Justice and Attorney General's office, they are working on classification of murder charges. I don't know how far they've gotten with that. But it's very important because in Ghana, I think most of the time, based on evidence, once you've committed murder, you are sentenced. Previously, you were sentenced to death. Now, it is only for high treason. Even that, high treason, it means you didn't commit a murder, but you were attempting something on the state. But with that also, we believe that it doesn't warrant death penalty. I hope that's okay. Thank you. Another question? Yes.
Madam, you've partly answered my question. What I find troubling is that somebody you see, a family member of yours, being murdered in front of you. Then there's people outside who are pleading on behalf of that person to be led back to society.
Okay.
I'll give you a typical example. A fetish priest murdered somebody at Anglogan some years back.
Okay.
He has been pardoned under the Justice for All program. He still come back and still doing the same thing.
Sorry, come again.
He still come back and still doing the same thing. He was pardoned under the Justice for All program 2 years ago. And he's still in the community repeating those same things again.
And has it been reported? That
I will never write anything on it again. I nearly lost my life when I was chasing that story.
Okay.
You see, so to me, I find it strange. I believe in tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye. Period. Seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. And I completely understand your view. We must also look at Ghana's historical context. We come from a context of colonialism, but we also come from a context of a regime. So I understand how a lot of Ghanaians may believe eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. I must, however, caution this statement because I personally, not just an Amnesty view, but I personally feel this is not the way we should behave in society. I don't know how when someone takes one life, because someone has taken one life, you take another life, it doesn't really solve the issue. Statistics have shown that death penalty does not serve as a deterrent for these crimes. Now, in that particular case you mentioned, maybe the person should have remained in prison without a pardon and without, without parole. Those are some of the circumstances you have to look at if the person committed a crime. But I know with Justice for All program, they usually don't do that for death row inmates. I know that they do it for petty crimes and you would have to clarify on that because I know the Justice for All program, and what I know right now is that they do not do the legal cases for those on death row currently. They only do it for petty crimes and that kind of thing. So, yes, please do.
Thank you. So please, still to add up to what she said, Amnesty is not calling that we bring those people back into society. We are saying that, like she explained, if we are going for an eye for an eye, we're going to have a country of blind people. We are all going to be blind. Is that what we want? So what we are saying is that let's replace the death with life sentence. Please, do you get that clear? We are not saying that bring them back into society. If they are reformed and it's been confirmed that such a person has earned the opportunity to come back into society, fair enough. But it's not our position that we say, okay, let's bring all those on death penalty back into society. We are saying that as a country, why don't we replace death sentence with life imprisonment? Like she rightly stated, killing me for killing A doesn't bring A back. That is the moral stance, if you look at it. Once you kill me because I killed A, if that brings A back, that would have been a different situation. But it doesn't solve the problem. So do we lose the two, or we correct, or take the person through a certain process that can reform him or her? Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, I need to add to that because I want to give you real examples. Look at Nelson Mandela. After being imprisoned for so many years, when he came back, he did not feel his captors had to be subjected to cruelty and be killed. He could have decided to kill them all, in fact. But that doesn't really solve the issue. Nelson Mandela rather looked for methods of reconciliation and forgiveness. We can also look at Rwanda when we look at President Kagame. He also did something similar during the Hutu-Tutsi crisis. He could have used all sorts of means to put certain people on death row and kill. But he chose reconciliation and forgiveness. So like my vice board chair said, yes, there's reconciliation and forgiveness. That is what we should be seeking. Healing. That is what we should be seeking. However, life imprisonment is definitely the way to go. Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you very much.
No, we'll close for now.
Okay.
So thankfully, we've heard that and the Ministry of Gender has started with the distribution in some schools. So the call from Amnesty is for us to speed up the implementation and also increase the stakeholder involvement. I'm sure some of us are probably not aware. So like the director mentioned, we are only calling that we put hands together and make sure that the implementation is up to the standard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, a round of applause to our director and board vice chair. I think a little bit respect to me that they still have some questions, but maybe they want to come to director personally and then do one-on-one and then do the interview with them. So that's also allowed. Yes, yes, it's allowed. So thank you very much for coming. If you look around the room, you see that we've mounted pull-ups of faces of women, elderly women, and you may ask why. This is actually a campaign we are running, anti-witchcraft accusations campaign, and we are calling on the president, just as it was read in our statements, to sign assent to the witchcraft accusations bill. So these are stories of women who are currently in the alleged witches camp. We have others in Kuko camp. Some of them are in Gambaga. Some are in Nani camps as well. So you can get closer and read about their story. The report, it was actually a report that Amnesty International launched, a research report called Branded for Life. And if you scan the code right on the banner, you get access to the full access to the Branded for Life report as well. Thank you very much for participating in the press conference. Please do not leave. We have some snacks available for you, and then also meet with the admin officer before you leave. Thank you very much, and this has been a wonderful press conference. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful day, please.